About half of all student loan debt, or something like that, is at the graduate level, but you never hear anyone talk about it. Well, my guest today does. He helps graduating healthcare professionals get their arms around and build a plan to pay back their student debt. And his advice is going to be useful no matter what part of the world, if you have graduate student debt, you're going to come from. I'm Carl White, principal at Market Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of Practice Care. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Not only is that what they want, but care is better when the provider owns the practice, because that's when they're going to have the most freedom to make the clinical decisions they think are best. It's just different when somebody else owns the practice. Usually, sometimes, eventually, their agenda starts to creep in and becomes more for the provider to think about. Let's just kick all that out and help them stay private to begin with. My guest today is Mark Johnson. Mark serves as a wealth advisor with RBF Wealth Advisors. He helps families, retirees, healthcare professionals, business owners, and corporate executives plan for success across all aspects of their financial life. Mark is also the founder of StudentLoansRx, which helps emerging healthcare professionals create plans to address their student loan debt in the most cost-effective manner based on their career and other financial goals, which may include practice ownership. He's been interviewed on numerous podcasts, including a number of dental podcasts, including the Dentalpreneur Podcast, Dental Student Vibes, Dentistry Uncensored, Financial Flossing, very cool names, and a bunch of others as well. Mark, thank you for taking some time to come on Practice Care.
Thanks, Carl. Nice to be with you today.
Yes. Before we get into student loan debt and how to pay it back, the monster numbers that they can be, I want to start with you, where I start with every guest. Help us get to know you a bit better. The bio I asked for was short. Very curious how you got into this niche of student loan repayments. So
sure,
the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. So I've been in the investment industry just over 30 years now. And about 10 years ago, I got invited to speak to a group of, as it turned out, orthodontic residents. We've got a very large residency program here in St. Louis where we're based. I went in like most financial advisors, kind of gave my financial planning 101 presentation, the importance of budgeting, insurance planning, start investing early. Left that presentation, and a number of those residents wanted to visit with me one-on-one afterwards. And then they dropped the big bomb on me. One said, I have 400,000 of student loan debt. I said, what? 400,000? Another one had, and then one had 750,000 of student loan debt. And they said, do you know anything about student loan repayment? I said, no, I don't. I said, it sounds like a significant financial planning issue. Let me see if I can find someone that I can bring in as a resource for you and your co-residents.
Yeah.
I poked around in St. Louis, couldn't find anyone. I expanded my reach. I found somebody in California, somebody in Florida. The entrepreneur light bulb went off and said, maybe there's an opportunity here to help these residents. And that was the genesis of StudentLoansRx. And so that was 10 years ago. And over the past 10 years, we've helped literally hundreds of, mostly dental, but we also work in the other healthcare spaces. And last year we touched, I think, 50% of different dental schools and across the country. And so our mission is to help emerging healthcare professionals create a strategy in the context of an overall financial plan. And I think that's what maybe distinguishes us from some of our competition. We're not just here to tell you today what is your best student loan repayment strategy, because that might change as your career and life evolves. You get married, you have kids, you start a practice. All of those are considerations in how you should approach your student loan repayment.
Yeah. And this is a tough topic to, we say bite-sized advice here on Practice Care. This is a tough topic to try to do justice to it. So I was thinking about the best way in. But before I do, I have to ask, maybe this is a naive question. How do you amass $750,000 of debt? I mean, and I don't mean that how it sounds. I'm just really stymied on how one accumulates such a large number.
So obviously, we'll just take dentistry for an example. You go to 4 years of undergrad, and you can go to a state school or you can go to expensive private school. Same thing with your graduate level degree. To become a dentist, you can go to a state school, or you can go to NYU and spend $600,000 to become a dentist. Then if you go on to maybe a year or two of residency, or if
Okay.
you become in this case, this group originally I visited with were orthodontists, so that's a 2.5-year program at St. Louis University is a fantastic school, but it's not cheap.
Yeah.
And so that's probably a few spring breaks mixed in there, and and you could end up with $750,000 of
Okay.
student loan debt.
Yeah. And I didn't mean it in a judgmental way. I was just could not wrap my head around
Yeah.
how one could, just the math of it all. So now I get it. So
Yes.
So let's jump in. There are out there programs and options available. And the question is how you tell them apart. And the background of it is, so I watched the student loan crisis from a distance in the news, just like most other people. But I was aware of at least two, income-based repayment options or plans through, I think, the federal government. I'm sure I'm getting some of these facts wrong. And they just seemed kind of similar. I never dug into what the differences were, but there are options out there. So let's start there. What just for anybody, what's available?
Sure. So during the Biden administration, there was some significant changes to federal student loan repayment. Was on the news a lot, right? And so what came out of all of that was essentially one new student loan repayment program. So there had been three income-driven. There were actually three income-driven repayment plans. All new borrowers will basically come under one, and that's the SAVE plan. Saving on a Valuable Education is the definition of the acronym.
Okay.
There's another plan out there called Pay As You Earn.
Okay.
That plan is going away in 2024. So when somebody is getting ready to graduate, or if they're on a plan right now that if they want to review what's the correct plan, the SAVE plan basically says that as all income-driven repayment plans is it's based on your income. So once you have to submit your tax return or your most recent pay stub, and they all calculate over the next 12 months what your payment's going to be. Okay. And you can go to studentaid.gov. They have a simulator on there that you can plug in your data and it spits out a number. It's fairly accurate. Okay. There's some nuances if you're married. So, or if your spouse has some student loans. So there's some nuances there, but the bottom line is you're going to be responsible for about 10% of your discretionary income. There's a formula to determine the discretionary piece of that. Okay. Once you get on the SAVE plan, let's just say that your payment's $1,000 a month. But let's say you have $400,000 of student loan debt.
Okay.
So at 6% interest, that's $2,000 a month of interest. Right? 400,000 at 6%. It's $24,000 a year, or $2,000 a month of interest. So, but let's just say your payment is $1,000.
It's not 3,000?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Keep going.
Yeah. So again, income-driven repayment. Put in your income. Let's say it spits out your payment's going to be $1,000, but your interest is accruing at $2,000. So on the SAVE plan, you make your $1,000 payment. Uncle Sam forgives the remaining interest.
Okay.
So you just received a $1,000 interest forgiveness each month for that next 12 months.
Okay.
So your effective interest rate, right? If Uncle Sam is forgiving half of your interest, your effective interest rate on that plan is really 3%, not 6%. So that's a very attractive plan, especially for recent graduates to get on. If you're married, you have the ability to file your taxes married, but then your spouse's income is going to be taken into account in calculating your payment. If you file your taxes separately, then you can have your payment based just on your income and not your household income. And so the work that we do with our clients is to help them determine, does it make sense financially and in line with your other goals? Let's say they're trying to accumulate cash to buy a practice. Their strategy, their student loan repayment strategy in the first 2 or 3 years might be to keep their payments as low as possible so they can accumulate cash to buy a practice.
Right. Okay.
Okay. As opposed to if you don't enroll in an income-driven repayment plan, After you've graduated 6 months, you have a grace period of 6 months.
Mhm.
After 6 months, if you have not enrolled in any plan, you automatically default to the standard, which is a 10-year repayment plan. And on a $400,000 loan, that's like $4,200 a month.
Mhm.
So that usually gets their attention when they get the notice that their payment's going to be $4,200. We tend to get quite a few calls
I
after
bet
that.
you do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So two follow-up questions.
yes.
So the first one is on that example, 1,000, 2,000. So is the $1,000 a month payment going towards principal or the interest?
It's only going towards interest. Great point. Yeah. So if your payment does not exceed your interest accrual, you're not making any progress in terms of principal payments. You're just covering a portion of the interest.
Okay. And then, so eventually, actually I have three questions. That's the first one. So then I didn't think about this one. So at what point do you start chipping away at the principal?
Okay. So income-driven repayments have, on the SAVE plan, that is a 25-year repayment schedule.
Okay.
So the theory is you make a payment for 25 years. If there's a balance left over at the end, that balance is forgiven. However, it's taxable income to you. So let's say you made payments for 25 years and at the end, there's still $50,000 left over.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're going to get a 1099 that year that shows an additional, they're going to forgive the balance, but you have to pay taxes on that $50,000 of forgiveness. It's like if somebody ever has a settlement with a credit card company, they owed 50,000, but they knocked off 35,000 or whatever, you pay taxes on that, forgiveness.
But I guess financially it's better to pay taxes on 50 than the whole 50, right?
Yes.
Maybe not.
Well, so here's
because you pause, so I don't.
Well, so here's the thing. Let's say we're talking about somebody who's coming out of school with $400,000 of student loan debt. You spread that out over 25 years. Now essentially you've doubled the cost of your education, right? If you make because in the first number of years, so what happens is on an income-driven repayment plan, you have to recertify your income every 12 months. Okay. So every 12 months they come back and look at your income. Presumably your income's going up over time. Mm-hmm. So your payment's going up over time. Mm-hmm. At some point, your payments likely exceed your monthly interest. And so you do start chipping away at principal a little bit. Okay. Again, that's all based on income.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. If you graduated from Yale and you're a librarian, and you had $400,000 of student loan debt and you're making $65,000 as a librarian, we need librarians. Okay. But maybe your income doesn't grow significantly over that 25-year period of time. You might end up with $200,000-$300,000, at the end. And guess what? You're going to pay taxes on that forgiveness.
Yeah.
So part of the strategy of planning is if your strategy is to stretch these things out over 25 years, okay, you better be saving some money to account for that big tax bomb at the end. And that's actually what the strategy is called. It's called the tax bomb strategy. Okay. I was in the military. I was told to avoid bombs whenever possible. But so I don't just on advice. just on theory, I don't like that strategy. I think people should, on the front end, you should figure out a way, okay, if I'm going to be taking out all these loans to get through school, what's my strategy to get these things knocked out in 10 years after school? I think that's a question that parents and students need to have at the front end. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't visit with them until it's, it's at the back end.
The first statement. Yeah.
Yeah. But, we have conversations with clients that theoretically our goal is to help you put together a plan to knock these things out in 7 to 10 years. Okay. That's my personal philosophy. Right. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's kind of what we're trying to get our clients prepared to do. Sure. It's kind of like, when would you like to run a marathon? I'd kind of like to run a marathon in, 7 years. I'm like, well, that's probably too long. You're probably not going to be motivated to get in shape over a 7-year period to run a marathon. But, 2 years, 3 years. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
probably a little more reasonable. So we're just trying to use some common sense in the
Yeah.
process as well.
And I think you pretty much, I'm going to ask the question anyway. So it can't just be me. I think there's a presumption, maybe it's a reflex, where people hear income-driven repayment plan and they think, oh, that's for low-income people. But it doesn't sound like that's the case. It sounds like maybe it's a more of like some kind of ratio of your income to what you owe. And theoretically, anybody could qualify depending on how much you owe, right?
So income-driven repayment,
Or save, I guess, what's coming forward, what's.
Yeah. So income-driven repayment has nothing to do with your balance. That's
Okay.
I mean, again, we're talking about a government program, so this doesn't have to make sense, right? We just have to understand the
Yes.
rules, but it doesn't have to make sense.
The nonsensical, yes.
Yes. So income-driven repayment, you can make X amount of money. Where income-driven repayment comes in helpful with emerging healthcare professionals, they do come out of school with a lot of student loan debt. And so where the default, the 10-year standard repayment might be $4,000 or $5,000 a month, most first-year graduates aren't ready to take a swing at that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so income-driven repayment, is essentially 10% of your discretionary income. So it establishes a base. And then each year, as your income goes up, or each year you have to recertify your income.
Yeah.
And if your income stays the same, you're going to have a constant, you can feel assured that your payment isn't going to be more than 10% of your discretionary income.
Okay.
And again, that's a formula. It actually comes out to be around 7 or 8% of your gross income.
Okay. Right. Because got
it. They make some deductions or allowances for, are you married? How many children do you have? Folks in California, as opposed to where I live in Missouri, get an allowance because it's more expensive to live in California than in Missouri. So there's some formula, but essentially that's how that works. And then, again, spreading this out over 20 or 25 years. Now, starting out, an income-driven repayment plan might be a fantastic option, and it might be the only one you can afford.
Mm-hmm.
But 3, 4, 5 years into your career, you're making more money, you've built up your emergency savings, you've got good transportation, you're kind of established now to some degree. Maybe you can afford a payment more than that. And the other thing that we haven't talked about is, interest rates really kind of drive this conversation as well. So, student loans right now, most graduates graduating today, their average student loan is probably in the 6% range, 6.25%, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But once you're right now, as we know, interest rates have gone up considerably in the last year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
To refinance. So there's a whole nother industry called private refinancing,
Mm-hmm.
where people can take their loans out of the federal program and refinance them with a private lender. Right now, though, rates are like 7%.
Makes no sense.
So you're not going to do that today.
Mm-hmm.
But during COVID, we were able to get a number of our clients refinanced under 3%.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing that we're keeping an eye on with our clients is like, okay, you're making good money. It doesn't make sense to refinance today, but the Fed kind of gave an indication. They're backing down that a little bit now, but there could be some interest rate declines in the next year or so, possibly sometime in 2024, 25. And if rates get to where you can refinance your student loans at 4.5% or 5%, then maybe it makes sense to consider doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's really, it's you don't set it and forget it.
This is not
forced to check in every year anyway. So it's a good time to have a look anyway.
Yeah. I say student loan repayment planning is not a one-time event.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a transaction that you do. It's just like you buy a house, you have a mortgage for 30 years. I don't know anybody that has maintained their mortgage for 30 years. Now, if you refinance during COVID and you got something close to 3%, maybe
you're sticking around.
There might be a few people that do that, right?
Yeah.
But generally speaking, people are moving, they're refinancing as rates allow, so forth.
Yeah. So I have two questions. I'm actually going to combine them because they're related. And you've hit on parts of them, but just to ask it so we can get it all packaged up neatly. It's basically, the best time to plan to pay back student loan debt, which sounds like before you start paying. And then the really important elements to think about in a loan repayment strategy. So let me just package those together and ask you.
Sure. So as folks are getting ready to graduate, they have an idea, anticipated what their income's going to be in their, the first year or two. That's really, we encourage folks to start thinking about the repayment within a few months of graduation. Now they got a lot on their plate. They're looking for jobs and stuff like that. But,
but a six-figure loan ought to figure in the high priority. I'll just,
Yes. And then the question is in healthcare, obviously there's what's called public service loan forgiveness. So if you've got $500,000-$600,000 in student loans, and you have the ability to go work at a federally qualified provider, either in a dental office or if you're a doctor in a hospital, and you can put 10 years of public service in, you get on an income-driven repayment plan for 10 years. You essentially are making an interest-only payment. And at the end of your 10-year commitment in public service, they forgive the balance tax-free.
Interesting.
So a lot of doctors go in that direction. They go to work in a, federally qualified, a lot of hospitals are federally qualified for public service loan forgiveness. Some people can go into the military. So there are paths to go prior to graduation that should be considered. The military, going to work in the public sector, negotiating student loan repayment as part of your, salary or benefit package for an employer. Now I know most of your audience are either practice owners or aspire to be practice owners, but generally speaking, that doesn't take place the first couple of years out of school, right?
Yeah.
And so, having a strategy as you're entering your career, as I would call it, a short-term strategy. There's also some, if you go the public service route, there's also some scholarships where you can get on, where you get, as much as $120,000 of scholarship for 3 years of public health. A lot of the states have programs that they'll give you a couple of years, $25,000 a year. So they're coming right out of school. There are some, additional opportunities for student loan forgiveness that aren't available later, later in your career.
And one thing that is well known is that in, medical school, dental school, most others, there's no business training, right? There's no business education. We know this, but is there anything like this? Like I was picturing you describing, like sort of like a, I don't know, a career fair day, or are there resources to say, look, you're graduating soon, and here are options, here are pathways, go check it out, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
Do you see that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of things out there on the internet, obviously. We have resources available. There's others out there. White Coat Investor. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah, sure.
They've got some resources. They focus, I think, more on the medical side, but there are resources out there. Obviously, everyone has what's called a loan servicer. So when somebody has borrowed money from the federal government through financial aid, they have a loan servicer that they selected or that's been assigned to them. There are resources on their websites on the various different repayment plans. We offer a free 30-minute consult. People can visit our website, click on the green free consult button, and we offer a free 30-minute consult. Our takeaway is that, with the limited financial expertise coming right out of school, whether you're a doctor, a dentist, pharmacist, veterinarian, their training is very specialized and focused, as is ours, right? So I don't know anything about, my wife's a nurse, so I know a little bit about some stuff, and I'm 55. I've never had a cavity, so maybe I know more about dentistry than the average Joe. But anyway, my training's been very specialized in the finance area, and so we feel that we offer tremendous value to our clients. I'm assuming they feel they offer tremendous value to their patients.
Sure.
And so that's
but
what
so
makes
as far as you've
go around,
seen in your tours, you've got a pretty good tour schedule that you've done in the past and coming up, you really haven't seen, I don't know what to call it. Like, because you're right. We can fire up Google and go crazy all we
So
want.
there's a number of,
It's just
yeah.
nice if a school would say, we've sorted through a lot of that and we're bringing some good resources too. Cause you're 25 or 6 or whatever it is, depending on the specialty. You don't know what your future looks like. You're not quite sure what you want. You think, but it's going to change. It could change. And you got this 6-figure nut looming 6 months away. Holy freaking cow. It'd be nice if they vetted and brought in, but
different schools have different responses to that. I would say most of them, are very weak on the finance piece of it. They have a financial aid office. I think they view their role as getting the funding to pay for the college, and that's kind of it. Many schools do offer, a short exit interview that lays out kind of, here are some options, where I have seen some good material is different associations. So for example, we work a lot with, as you know, the dental field, the American Student Dental Association. They have some resources. The ADA, I know the MDA has resources on their website. And so I know the Orthodontic Association. They're based here in St. Louis. So associations usually have some resources for that type of thing. But at the school level, it's kind of hit and miss, to be honest with you. I know a couple of the schools that we work with, they offer some practice management classes, in the dental space for their 4th-year students, to talk a little bit about that. We get invited to come in and speak in a number of places, and we're always open to doing that. Obviously virtually is very easy. If it's, so that's also on our website. If anyone listening wants to invite us to speak to a school or a residency program, we're always available to do that. So there are resources out there, but it's a little diffuse, I would say, because but there's some good resources out there.
Well, one way to jump in, at least to give us, a little bit of advice, is, are there any big planning mistakes really you got to avoid? So even if you don't know what good looks like, can you give us 1 or 2 examples of what bad looks like? So at least that could be on the radar.
Sure. So the first thing is, many graduates are going to get on an income-driven repayment plan as they transition from school into either residency or their career. To establish an income-driven repayment plan, you have to demonstrate income, or you have to have a source document that demonstrates income. So I always encourage people, the last 2 years of graduate school, to file a federal tax return, even if, and especially if, you have no income. So if you go and apply for an income-driven repayment plan and you have had the last 2 years of zero income, your first 12 months, you should not have to make a payment at all, because 10% of zero is still zero, right? If you avoid filing a tax return, then you're going to have to come up with a pay stub. And they're going to take your pay stub and they're going to annualize out your income. So if your salary is $150,000, your payment's going to be based on $150,000. It could have been based on a zero tax return had you filed one your last couple of years of school. And the reason I say 2 years is because zero tax returns, for obvious reasons, are the last returns the IRS gets to. And so, if you are going to file a zero tax return in 2024 for 23, and you wait until April 15th, and you graduate on May 15th, your tax return is not going to be completed. So you want to file the last 2 years of tax returns. So that would be one gold nugget, I would say. That's a big mistake. Perhaps millions of graduates don't do that. Second thing is, you do get a 6-month grace period. So if you graduate on May 15th, presumably you don't have to start making payments until November. However, interest is accruing.
I know. God, it's like, why do they do that? Don't answer that. But
so what we do is, we for our clients is we want to get them enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan as quickly as possible. So back to that original example, let's say your interest is accruing at $2,000 a month. Well, if you had filed a tax return and we'd got you enrolled at zero, you're getting $2,000 a month now of interest forgiven. If you let your 6-month grace period expire, now we've got $12,000 of interest that's accrued, in my view, unnecessarily.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. Don't waste your 6-month grace period.
Okay.
File a tax return the last 2 years, and then, find someone qualified to help you put together a plan.
Yeah.
Because we've seen all kinds of horror stories of someone said, well, my roommate did this, or my uncles worked at finance at Ford. That's a true story.
So they must know everything.
they must know everything about student loan repayment.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, free advice is usually worth about what you pay for.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
and I gotta tell you, having filed in my past tax returns with very low income, don't get turned off by that. It takes like 20 minutes, maybe. It's really easy because there's very little to say in your tax return. You have no income. So don't be turned off by that.
Some of the online tools won't let you file a zero tax return. So you actually have to print the form and fill it out. It's not a big deal.
One page. Yeah.
And what I tell people is, listen, your parents may have somebody doing their taxes. Just have your parents' CPA do a zero tax return for you.
Yeah.
And say thank you. And hopefully they won't even charge you anything, because it's that quick. It's that quick, but it's that important. You keep a copy of it, you send it in, and then when you go to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan, you upload the PDF of your zero tax return, and you're off to the races.
You're off to the races. Perfect. We have covered a lot of ground. I think maybe more than I expected, which is great. But in that context, 2 questions that I ask every guest, kind of wrapping up. So even though we've covered a lot of ground, is there anything you think I should have asked but didn't, or any particular points you think we need to make but we just haven't made yet?
I think we're good.
Okay. Okay. And then the other question I ask is, so we've caught somebody's attention. Let's say, because I guess I won't qualify, but we've caught somebody's attention. They want to get going on their student loan, either make it better or sort of get out from underneath it, whatever it is. But they're stuck they just don't know where to start. They're stuck at the starting line. Are there 1 or 2 simple things you could recommend to kind of give them the motivation? All right, now I know what to do. Now I can get going down the path to making this situation better for me.
Well, the first thing I would say is that they need to understand the ins and outs of this new income-driven repayment plan called the SAVE plan.
Okay.
They can go to studentaid.gov and do their research on that. Selfishly, I would encourage them to visit with a qualified professional. We certainly can help them. There are others out there that work in this space, but they could visit our website at StudentLoansRx.com, click on the free consult button, and either myself or one of my colleagues would be happy to visit with them just to make sure that they're on the right repayment plan based on what they're trying to accomplish. I mean, sometimes people just sign up for something and they go years and years thinking, well, what are my options? And maybe they're not on the right option.
Yeah.
If something changes in their life where they have a change in their income, they get married, those are all triggering events to kind of revisit your strategy to make sure that, you're still on the right path.
I wonder what proportion of the population doesn't even realize there are options. Like, here's the statement, here's what I owe. I got 10 years. This is my life.
So we push out a lot of information. We have a newsletter people can subscribe to. We push out a lot of information on the new plan, and I still have, several consults a week. We still have several consults a week where people are still confused on the SAVE plan. It's, as I would be confused if somebody explained something about healthcare that maybe I don't work with every day. So, hiring and getting a consultation with a qualified professional, especially if it, is probably not a bad way to, if you got $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of student loan debt, maybe it makes sense to schedule a free 30-minute consult.
Yeah, isn't that worth the coffee?
Yeah,
Right.
I don't know what's the downside there.
Can't think of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, can't think of it. Cool. Mark, thank you for coming on for educating us on this. Undergraduate, education for my kids is not so far into the future. So I was listening with an extra ear. So thank you so much for coming on to Practice Care and providing this information.
My pleasure. And thanks for what you do for practice owners.
Thank you very much. And so Mark provided a lot of contact information. It's all going to be in the show notes for this episode. So anybody who wants to get a hold of him, now that's another way to do so. A couple of points before we wrap up. First, if you are a private practice owner and you have figured out a side of the, part of the business side of private practice that you think others would benefit from hearing about, or if you service private practices like Mark or I do in one way or another, and you've got expertise that you want to share that would benefit private practice owners, either way, we want you to come on Practice Care and tell the world about it. In the show notes for Mark's episode and every episode, there's a link, couple of clicks, tell us what's on your mind so we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, please subscribe to Practice Care. We do a new episode every week. That's the easiest and best way to stay up to date is to subscribe. Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, Amazon. We're just about everywhere. So we're easy to find. Just search Practice Care and we show up. Please subscribe so you can stay up to date. Thanks very much. And until next time.